Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Speedrun Insider. My name is CJitsallGewd. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week. We really appreciate it. Thank you for all the downloads, the likes, the comments, the sharing with your friends, the telling of your cats. Even though your cats can't download, you can download for them. Be a good owner. We really appreciate it. Help keep the show free and clear, talking to the people that we want to talk to by continuing to listen. That's all we ask you to do. It's all we'll ever ask you to do. Fun fact. So, I got one more thing I want to tell you about before we get started with my guest today. Speeddoxathon is August 27th, 28th, 29th, and September 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. That is the second ever Speeddoxathon. It is a 7-day, 12 to 14 hour per day marathon, raising money for all hands and hearts. You don't have to donate, just come check it out. It'll be at twitch.tv/speeddox on those dates. If you want to check out the schedule, you can go to speedrun.com/SDAT, SDAT 2021. That's speedrun.com/SDAT 2021. The schedule will be linked on the page there. So if you want to, submissions are closed. The schedule is already up. And you, yes, you, no, not you, the guy behind you, yes, you can come watch the show. And we hope that you do. Help support the show. You don't have to donate. Just come watch. It really helps. We have a very special guest today. I say that every week, but I mean it every week. We have a great guest, a great show for you today, great plan for the show. The NBA-style intros are still going. Very sad. NBA Jam, he's on fire. Not allowed back, but soon. My guest for today is the host of the Mechanations podcast and Overboost. It's PMCTrilogy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for bringing me on here.
Thank you for agreeing to be on. You know, how's it on the other side of the desk?
You know, it's pretty comfy. I would say this is actually not the first time I ever guested on a speedrun pod. There was a brief pod. Shout outs to Fricassee, the maintainer of the Obscure Speedruns Club, who briefly did a podcast about, of course, obscure speedruns, and he had me on once to talk about Shogo. So just shout outs to Fricassee, who, you know, while I think he didn't stick with the podcast, still does an excellent job with that group. So it was fun then before I had ever podcasted myself, and now, you know, with the experience of I guess 2 years and change podcasting, it's fun to be back again as a guest.
Yeah, I bet. So you've been doing this for, you said 2 years and change of podcasting?
Yeah, I think that's right. So it would have been, it would have 2 years and change, because I want to say January 2019 was when Mechanations started. Again, Mechanations is a mecha anime critical analysis rewatch podcast where me and two friends who I've known for several decades, we go through mecha anime shows, your Gundam and other things. And initially we had been, of course, recording live. We have long since transferred to recording remotely. And that was my major introduction to, I've been the producer for the show. I'm the one who handles the recording equipment and edits the audio and all of that. So, that was my focus, whereas my colleagues were coming up with, intelligent and funny things to say. I was kind of handling the technical side of things.
Yeah, I get that. There's a bit of plate spinning on the getting the podcast made side that I think that the listeners at home may consciously be aware of, but not actively aware of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it too, especially because audio is one of those things that's been around for a while, right? You can get some old audio equipment that still works very well. And there's all levels of audio equipment, beginning stuff. I think a lot of people, for example, associate USB devices with being more beginner friendly. And then you have, interfaces with XLR cables and this and that. And audio is one of those things, like many hobbies, where you can spend as much money as you want. And, who knows what sort of results you'll get, because you also have to know how to use it. It's definitely an adventure, and becoming more aware of it is interesting, especially what people like to do. Because at a certain point, it's also preference. I prefer to use Audacity still, which I know is well, aside from recent news, which we can or cannot talk about, but is it itself, but even before that news, a sort of discourse, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's like spyware now, right?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that happens with open source software where you have a maintainer and the project becomes too much for them to maintain. And so someone comes along and says, hey, just we'll become owners of it and we'll maintain it. And then almost seems inevitably it starts to corrupt. I will say, I mean, there's two things here, of course. One is that you can install an old version. I haven't updated Audacity in years, and turns out that was the right decision. And then also, it still is open source, and so of course, if you're familiar with open source software, people are already forking it, which means to create a different version of the software that's available via a repository like GitHub, and you get a version presumably without all the spyware and other things in it. I mean, I think the news was like the agreement would allow them to sell your data, give your data to the police, and then the police everywhere. I mean, obviously I don't know. I'm not here to advocate for police in any country, but who knows? Really the sky was the limit by the terms of the updated agreement language. And people were upset by that. But of course, again, good news with open source software is that old versions are out there, forks are out there. So if you want to keep using Audacity, technical reasons be damned, you can do so.
Yeah, no, I read that and I was like, I pulled on my collar. I was like, oh, they're gonna sell my information. I'm like, what information do they have, right? And then I was like, well, do they know my voice? I imagine this, like, I have this idea that like Homer Simpson stealing Willie's grease. They have some kind of pump where they've secretly been stealing my waveforms. Like rubbing their hands together, like yes, we got this is my retirement grease. So I don't know. I'm like, what are they stealing? What are they selling? I get that they could, right? But like, what is it? It's so like, oh, that's your data. What data? People froth at the mouth and foam. And their eyes dilate, their pupils dilate, and their eyes cross. They're like, my data! And I'm like, your Star Trek character? Like, what are you losing? Sometimes I think, I'm like, okay, I could get mad every time that someone took my data. But be a lot like that bully in the first grade that I got mad every time he pinched me. I'm like, what is the end result? What are you taking from me? Right? So that's how I contextualize it so that I sleep at night. But if you have anything further that you'd like to say, I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, you do have to ask yourself as an individual. Like we could talk about so many things where one of the things I would say is really to put all the onus on individual behavior is gonna hurt your ability to sleep at night, as you said, right? If you stress yourself out to no end, even if it's justified, you're going to hurt yourself more than you're going to affect change. I mean, things like privacy. I mean, in terms of the data that's harvested, it's a lot of things like location data and, browsing habits and things like that become part of a sort of tapestry of what you do. And also like who you're with. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know, at some point, my wife really got into this particular brand of snacks. And since that happened, I would constantly get ads for those snacks whenever I looked at the Twitter app on the phone. And, and that's probably a product of the data shows that I'm in proximity with her. We probably live in the same place, et cetera, et cetera. And so, we affect each other in that way. Now, is that truly the end of the world? No. Should they do that? Maybe not either. But, the thing that we would want, ideally, is to have laws, to have big picture privacy laws. Vote for. I mean, this is ideal. This is electoralism, that you would vote for people that would then affect the change that you want to see, instead of those people being bought by the companies.
Right.
That would be the ideal. That because that's the whole thing, is that you and I are already busy with probably our day jobs and other things. We don't have the time to go and stop every single app maker from, engaging that behavior. It's like why you have class action, right? If Comcast screws everyone out of $100, we all can't take our time and money to hire a lawyer to get that money back from Comcast. But if a lawyer comes along and says, I'll represent all of you in a class action to hurt Comcast, that's a good deal. Like that's gonna put Comcast in the hole where they belong.
Yes, it puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the Comcast again. Unfortunately, Comcast is truly evil.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, I guess this is relevant. It's relevant to what I do for my day job. I work in advertising and marketing. And I think that people knew this when it happened, but I don't think they appreciated how much it really affected like advertisers. So I work for a car dealership in a relatively moderate-sized area in upstate New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Cambridge Analytica changed everything. That changed everything. I could target people based on their income before Cambridge Analytica. And I didn't know this, but all of that information was supplied by the credit firms. So all of the Facebook targeting that they gave us and all the information we had, like in the crazy days, Google would let you target people based on specific places in their house. Right? Like you could just target people's bathrooms, which is insane. Facebook was like, oh, you can target people based on credit. Now you can't do anything. Now they're like, no. Now we got caught with our hand in the cookie jar. So you can't serve you can't serve ads that are related to what people want at all. You have to, so especially with an offer of credit or like a product, if I'm going to advertise like a $50,000 truck, which I have to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
I have to advertise that to people that cannot afford it, which I think is a worse system, right? Now, it just sucks because in general, if you really if you look at this argument and you like stare at it until the linoleum starts to curl and the paint starts to peel, what people are really saying is they don't want targeted ads. They don't want ads, right? They just don't want ads. It's not that they don't want targeted ads. Like your wife has this snack and they serve you the ad for the snack, right? Statistically speaking, you're a person that's likely to buy that snack, right? Like because someone in your house bought that snack or has trended for that snack. And that's what we all want. We want you to buy the snack. We want to give people that buy the snack the ads. There's only so many ads that you can run online that are really based on actual conversion. So you have to settle for appealing to your own customer base, right? There's only so much you can do with the information provided to actually convince someone, hey, I want a Chevy, right? There's only so much you can do. It's like, okay, well, I know that you live in this 50-mile radius. Do you want to buy a Chevy? It's kind of like that. So on the one hand, I get it. I don't like all the intrusive ads. Ads are invasive and people put too many ads in too many places and it dilutes the experience. On the other hand, I'd rather them be targeted and based on things that I actually want than have random ads for stuff I don't care about. And as an advertiser, that's also what I want. I don't want to serve people ads for things they can't afford. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to send someone who makes $20,000 a year a $50,000 truck, because the shitty part is that person thinks they can afford it and they come in, right? So not only am I like perpetuating a bad situation of I don't want to send this person a car they can't afford, then they come in thinking they can afford it, which is the worst part. So that was a big long a big long response to the thing that you said. But yeah, I think there was a point in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand. This is maybe getting into more of a discussion about the place of advertising. I think what is the appropriate use of targeted advertisements, what sort of data should be available. Because I think once upon a time, the targeting would have been based upon who I think watches a TV show or who I think reads a newspaper or something like that. And that doesn't really. I don't think it bothers anyone to say, well, the people watching Dragon Ball Z were teenagers or something like that. No one's really flustered by that.
Right.
Definitely, but it definitely feels a bit different when, as you said, we could insert literally any mechanism based on, location data or income data or anything. And what is the appropriate usage of that? I think it's probably beyond the scope of me to say. I'm certainly not a expert in advertising or privacy, so I probably have to turn the corner back there. I don't know if I can offer more, besides maybe examples or something.
Yeah. Well, the other part is I definitely also value my privacy, so I'm a double hypocrite. Let's pivot away from this very interesting conversation of which neither of us are experts, and I want to talk about the Mechanations pod. Because I know JR, who was the editor for the show, actually is a big fan of anime. And I know one of his favorite shows is Gurren Lagann. Does that fit into your...
Yes, no, we covered Tapa Tenga, Gurren Lagann, I think some time ago. I want to say it was actually at the beginning of this year. It is a favorite show of one of my co-hosts, and we all really liked it. It definitely was very enjoyable. But no, that was one that was pretty much in our wheelhouse as well, because we're all kind of fiery leftists on the podcast, and Gurren Lagann has a lot of messages about collective action, besides also having some really cool mechs.
Yeah, he had me watch one episode. It was like I don't remember what it was. I was visiting him when he lived in a different state, and he showed me an episode where the guy had like a head and he had a body, and he's like, don't worry, and he put the head on top of the body.
Yes.
And I was like, why does that work? And I didn't watch any more. That's the one scene that I've seen.
I will tell you, it is a fundamental feature of that show that the answer is it just works. It is really not a show that is deeply concerned with. There's a division in the world of mecha anime. It is, like all genres and categorizations, an oversimplification, but a division that is referred to as real robot and super robot. Real robot being things that try to be more rooted in some level of realism or verisimilitude. Gundam, UC Gundam in particular. When I say UC Gundam, the show's in one particular setting where, it tends to be more of a global war and tends to be more interested in that wartime feeling like you would find in a film based on a real life war. Whereas something like Gurren Lagann is super robot, which is to say that all the robots and the mechs are primarily, first and foremost, vehicles to embody the narrative arcs and emotions of the characters, which is to say that in any given episode, chances are that once the character overcomes whatever emotional difficulty they're dealing with, at that point, their mech could defeat anything, do anything. It doesn't matter. We don't need suddenly you found the right bullets or something. No, it's going to work now. You can combine the mechs. Why not? Gurren Lagann even is a little self-aware of that. I think the particular sequence you were referring to is definitely one in which I think their enemy is like, what are you doing? You can't just combine them. But the answer is you can combine them, of course.
Yeah, of course, right? So I watched Kill la Kill, and I really like that show, and I think that was made by either the same team or I don't remember the case, but it was similar.
No,
so
you got it pretty much. I believe it was this. I want to say it was this. It's certainly the same director as director Meishi, who is known for a very frenetic, kinetic kind of style. I think more recently, he helmed the very popular movie Promare that was in some theaters right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I when I get into conversations about anime, my slip starts to show because I very quickly reveal that my anime consists of whatever the popular shonens are at that time. And
I mean, that's fine. The only thing I'll say, and this is an intentional bait for anyone who has opinions about shonen anime, is to say that Hunter x Hunter is the best shonen anime, and that is simply an objective fact.
I am gonna ride with One Piece until the death. So there we go.
I've never really experienced anything One Piece. I mean, it's a common, almost tired point about how many episodes there are. Blah 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 blah. I don't know. I would love to dip my toe into that somehow. I don't know what the best way to do that is, but I mean, clearly people love it, which is the most important thing, the word of mouth recommendation.
Yeah, I for me, it's 22 years of my life so far. Right, it's a 22-year long narrative. So when I decided I was going to get caught up and not just like have watched the oft episode, that was 2016, right? And I read the manga. I started watching the dub, and then when I finished the dub, I watched the sub, and when I ran out of sub, I started reading manga, and the manga got me to, at the time, the whole Cake Island arc. It was the start of that arc. That was 2016. They've only done one other arc since then. Like, we're in the middle of the arc that came after it. So it's a commitment to time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a marathon, not a sprint. But then everything kind of feels like he gets a breadcrumb once a week. It feels like he gets something. And then because it's something that gets more powerful the more you know about it, like a universe that just gets stronger and stronger the more corners of it that you can look at, you feel like you know more when you don't really know anything else. So it's I mean, listen, if nothing else, they've kept me high on their supply for 22 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, and that's the other fun thing too about a long running narrative is that you become familiar with it. You get the references, you discover new things. I feel like for that the thing that it fulfills that I guess maybe niche in my life is I'm a big fan. I don't know if you're much for JRPGs, but I'm very much into the Legend of Heroes Trails series, which is had a weird history of being localized, but I think recently actually there was leaks about a bunch of games finally getting localizations, which is exciting. And I'm close to hopefully I'll be in the next few months I'll be starting Trails of Cold Steel 4, and that's a series that I'm like 6 or 7 games into, and there's like another 4 or 5 waiting in the wings, and it's never gonna end.
Well, it sounds like you have a bright future in that regard ahead of you. What is the worst mech anime that you've ever seen?
Worst mech anime that I have ever seen. This is. Are we going for like a show or a movie? What kind of
The world is your oyster.
The world is my oyster. I'm trying to think about what I have watched through. I see. So, okay, all right. Here we go. I think I'm.
I have faith in you.
It's so bad. I forget the name. So there's a period of time where I was like, just I had watched some stuff on Netflix because I'd gotten my spouse was like, here, look, you can finally log into Netflix and look at things, and I watched some good things. I watched Unicorn Gundam and some other stuff, and then I was watching some other things, and I think the one that really jumps out to me as like weird in a bad way, but I forget what it's called. It was this one. It was like it was one done by Netflix, and it was, of course, it was based on a mecha. I'm just trying to do a quick Google to see if I can find it, but it was. It's got like a lot of like weird fleshy stuff, and it's got like a weird CG style. Knights of Sidonia. That's the one. That show is weird. It's really not good. There might be a sequel season, and I might watch it just because it's so bad. It's very strange.
Break me off a little piece. Previews of the remix. Why? What made it so bad?
I mean, so I think the basic answer is that I'm a big character person. I mentioned earlier about why I like Gurren Lagann is because it's got thematic material, it's got character material. It really works all those things together. In Knights of Sidonia, is more of what I would call a. It seems more preoccupied with the mystery box of that sort of like that tantalizing concealing of information, and that once you get all the details revealed, it will form this wonderful answer, and you'll be pleased with having played the thing. It's this sort of I would also say it's kind of like the worst part of spoiler culture, when people are very coy about something that's new because they think, oh, you just need to unwrap it and you'll love it. And let me tell you, that is not the truth. I played 13 Sentinels, which was a game that everyone was super coy about, and I wish they had been more forthright about it, because it probably would have saved me the trouble of playing it myself and not really enjoying it. But I think it's the same thing with Knights of Sidonia, where there's a lot of mystery in terms of the space colony and what happened to humanity and these elements, and the mystery is highlighted, I think, to the detriment of the characters and their personal interactions, and it just kind of it. And of course, the other thing is that I think being in a disjointed adaptation of manga, it does not really capture a full arc in its seasons, and that's already a problem. I'm definitely a strong proponent that you want to have some kind of arc, to say like, yes, this is the season closing up, and here, it just kind of ended. It's all right. Well, I guess maybe let's make more episodes. Hope you like that.
Hope you like that, indeed. Talk to me about how the Overboost podcast came to be.
Sure. So the Overboost history is definitely rooted in the Mechanations history. I think around the beginning of, I want to say the beginning of 2020, I had been looking for ways, and this was true of my co-host as well, is that we were kind of looking for some opportunities to do sort of side content episodes, sort of extra things to put on the feed. And I had the experience of having speedrun some mecha games, so that means I knew other people who did that. And so I thought, hey, as a side thing in the Mechanations feed, I can do these interviews where I ask people about how they got into mecha stuff, what their interest in anime is. Doing that, I did about 5 episodes that were released on the feed, and the 5th one ended up being with Peaches. Do you know Peaches? Like, most famous as a Blast Core runner, has been around forever.
Not to name, but sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, but he's a real old boy. I mean, his speedrunning, you can find him on SDA, like posts of his. He's still around. He still streams. He had been on websites even earlier than that. Some websites I never even heard of, which was really because I interviewed him, and that really prompted me to say, like, wow, if I was able to get all this information just by going around and asking someone who I knew about, but I guess other people, for whatever reason, weren't thinking to talk to, were there more people? And I looked at the time at what other speedrun interview podcasts would have been out there. This probably would have been, again, like spring of 2020, where I was looking, just seeing, like, I'd been aware of some. I think the one that I knew the most was My Insane Pace, was the other one that had been around. And I think at that point had largely, gone into hiatus, understandably, making podcasts is work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I after that experience, I said, okay, let me broaden it. Let me look at the types of runs and runners, especially people that I knew, or genres that I felt like were popular but weren't getting the attention that I felt like maybe they deserved. And so I started going down that route. I think that the first few people that I interviewed, like KZ Fru, one of my best buddies in speedrunning, talked to some horror people like Ecdysis, talked to Pete Dorr, who is really, Pete Dorr is more known as a retro game collector rather than a speedrunner, but has been, to a number of GDQs. And so the impetus was, we're all going into lockdown. It's spring of 2020, and I'd like to talk to people. And it seems like there's a lot of stories out there that would be worth sharing. And so that's, I would say, pretty much the origin story. I mean, the only thing to add is that I think at some point, later on, I decided to break into the live streamed format, with doing video, just to sort of play around with it, and it being a format that I enjoyed. Ended up at the beginning of this year when SRC changed hands and was looking for front page content. I was able to take advantage of that by immediately applying as soon as they opened up, and I was like, hey, you want this? And they came right back to me after, because I think my first interview I broadcasted on there was with Jay Hobbs, and then after that, they were like, yeah, you can just keep doing this. We'll just keep putting you on the front page. It's fine. And so it's been fun, but I think that was mostly the impetus. Was I felt like at the time I was looking at the podcasts, and a lot of podcasts were talking to like the same few runners, and some of those runners are very good people who are worth talking to. But I kept seeing them all over the place, and I just like I think there are people with stories worth telling, and I want to get to those people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, my criticism. So when I decided I was going to strike out on my own and do my own podcast, it was because I was so tired of looking at the Speedrun Reddit. And, it's my show, so I'll talk shit about people. I'm not going to, not specific people, but people in general. I was so tired of watching Speedrun podcasts crop up out of nowhere, interview Cheese, and then disappear.
Yeah,
that happened enough times.
I'm going to amend my earlier statement because I was trying to be very polite. I said most of those people are good people. There's a reason I said most, all right? And I'm going to be frank here. That guy, as someone who's very visible, has been in the past transphobic. A few months back, he was advocating crypto. Crypto is bad. I'm going to put that on my, staple that to my front, my brand. Crypto is bad. And anytime I see anyone in speedrunning, advocate for any sort of crypto stuff, I'm going to say that's bad. Don't do that.
So this is an interesting tangent I want to take, but I want to come back to this. Okay.
Okay.
This is an interesting tangent I want to take. This is my problem with crypto. Okay. And this is what I tell people when they ask me what my problem with crypto is. There is a moral problem with crypto in that it costs so much electricity.
Yeah, that's it, dog.
I said electricity is as evidenced by the Texas freeze. Electricity is not an infinite resource. It is a finite resource. Now you can make an infinite amount of electricity. There's no stop to the electricity pipeline, but there is a pipeline. And so we have sheds here that have 50 GPUs that gets to the front page of Reddit and everyone's like lauding over how smart that guy is. And I'm like, really? Because that's like, there's a great bit in The Simpsons. It's the grease episode again. I can't believe it's coming up twice in one episode, but it's the grease episode. Okay. He goes to the rendering plant to sell cans of grease. And it's Homer and Bart. And Homer gets 75 cents for like 8 pounds of grease. Okay. And Bart goes, but Dad, what about all that bacon? That bacon costs $25. He goes, yeah, but your mom paid for that. And he goes, yeah, but doesn't she get your money from you? And he goes, and I get my money from grease. What's the problem? Like, every fucking time. I'm like, you guys are spending an infinite amount of electricity for no fucking reason. Running huge power lines to a sea container.
Right. It's just, I mean, I think the energy is the most important thing. I think I already made one allusion on this podcast to to the concerns of climate change. You certainly brought up something that is related in terms of what happened with Texas's power grid and the freezing, and now we might be back to that with with warm weather as well, and the need for the use of AC and other climate control to prevent people from dying in heat waves, which is a very serious phenomenon. And and so the sea folks, especially for a speculative financial product, which is what all this crypto stuff is, it's speculative finance. It doesn't sit well. And so I'm certainly happy to hear that. Yeah, I think we're of like minds on that. When it gets back to, of course, when you have very visible people who are on podcasts or otherwise being featured in events, whatever the speedrunning format might be, you want those people, you want to criticize. If they're going to be a public instance of something negative, then that means they're going to get criticized and hopefully other folks take note of why we're being critical of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you see? I'm so curious what you have to say about this now. Did you see when GSA came out with the coaching thing?
Oh, is that wait? Okay, so the coaching thing has happened so many times now.
Yeah, well, the most recent iteration of it, right?
I think I remember that. Yeah, because I don't know. I think I was happy with at least what I saw on my Twitter feed, which was that I think the people were able to be a little more nuanced about the conversation, which is to say, they were ready to acknowledge that coaching can be applicable in all sorts of places. We can look at places where it is more readily accepted, sports, music, whatever, and then maybe places where it is not quite a thing, and whether or not it is warranted to pay someone for their time, that's always going to be a dicey discussion, a discussion in which people have literal stakes.
Mm-hmm.
That being one part of the discourse, the other part is being GSA's track record and people being uncomfortable with GSA. I'm not going to attempt to. I haven't thought about GSA in a while, so I'm not going to attempt to bring up what their rap sheet is. I feel like my impression from a lot of people that I trust is that they have a not great rap sheet. But I know some people. Is GSA the group that put together events like Pace? Am I thinking
yes,
the right?
Yes.
Okay, I know some people who've had good times at Pace. So like, if they put together great in-person events and people are treated well there, credit where credit is due. Absolutely. And that's really, that's what I'll say is, that was my impression. That is my memory of the recent GSA coaching speedrunning conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know some people that did not have a fun time at Pace, so I will.
Okay.
I will tell you that. I will tell you that horror story after the podcast because I won't bring that up. Thing that I will bring up. This was my point when I made during the show when it happened.
Yeah.
Coaching is what happens when someone who can't do it anymore decides to teach, right? So the best coaches are people that can't do it anymore, but they know how to do it and they can explain how, right? Barry Bonds hit more home runs than any other human being on the planet. Okay? He can't explain to you. He was the hitting coach for the Miami Marlins. And they said, how do you hit so many home runs, Barry? He says, okay, well, while I'm looking at the pitcher, I'm also looking at first base, and I'm looking at third base, and I'm looking at the first base coach, and I'm looking at the catcher, and I'm looking at the pitcher. Okay, how do you do that? I have no idea. Right? He just could do that. He could just knock the cover off the ball. This was my point about Simply and Cheese being speedrun coaches. Nobody that they have ever coached has ever had a world record in a game you've ever heard of. So what are you paying them for? That was my pie. Like, what if, like, you're paying them on what they've personally done? They've never coached anybody. Coaching themselves doesn't count. Like, what is that? Who taught them, right? Did they teach themselves? That's not really coaching. So, like, I'm more interested in how they learned. If anyone helped them along the way, those are the people that you'd have coach. It's like, oh, should we have the like, how good of a basketball coach would LeBron James be right now? So that was my overall point about the GSA thing. I'm just like good for them, right? But if you're going to pay somebody to coach you, you should look at their coaching record. And their coaching record is they've never coached anybody that had a world record.
But I mean, I think I would probably say too. First off, I think and this is maybe implied in what you were saying, is that the ability to teach and instruct is not necessarily a component of someone who has achieved highly in a particular area. It is not.
Right. Like
you're
Barry
not
Bonds.
necessarily. Yeah. You don't necessarily have that ability. I would be curious. I mean, coaching certainly in a top tier athletic area, you do see some athletes transfer into coaching. That is somewhere that they go afterwards, and so the arena that I'm much more familiar with, I'm much more familiar with music. And music, that is not really, for most people who, unless you encounter some sort of, disability that prevents you from using your hands or something like that, you can teach and play music forever, pretty much. There are some people who are just going to do that until they get put in the grave, and that's not a bad living. But of course, much like sports, being good at playing an instrument doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. Teaching is a profession. Shout outs to the teachers I've known who are good, and maybe a little raspberry to the teachers I've known who weren't good. So we're how the question for, especially for something that is a new set of skills, and I think it's reasonable to say that speedrunning can comprise a broad set of skills. Is that set of skills, formal in such a way that it would benefit from one-on-one instruction? And then also, how do you gauge whether or not someone is effective in that one-on-one instruction? And what does it mean to be effective? I think I might push back a little bit against about the idea that it would be a successful instruction for a student to go on to have a popular game, top time. Because I never went on to be, I'm not my day job is not music, but I would certainly say a lot of music lessons that I took and, later in my life paid for myself were worth it. I definitely have thoughts about, who my good music teachers were, and those were worth it. Never became a professional musician. I took a few gigs, but, so, it's, at this point, I would certainly say, maybe don't trust those folks for some other reasons. I would maybe be concerned for other reasons. But this is what I guess is what I'm saying is about this discussion around instruction, teaching, coaching. Is speedrunning ready for that yet? We could go back and forth. Like, all right, you were doing sports examples, I was doing music examples. We could bring in more stuff. We could get all education pedagogy in here and go crazy with it. And there'd be a lot of interesting stuff to go over. In terms of, especially, when does money change hands and what does it mean to have success? I don't know. It's interesting to talk about for sure.
The last thing that I'll say before we move on is that I agree with you that you and I could go get a lesson. Like, I could go get a hitting lesson from Barry Bonds. You could go get a lesson. A music lesson.
Sure.
And that I don't have an aspiration to go play Major League Ball. And you're not thinking you're going to go sell out, Carnegie Hall either. But the people that they're targeting with that service are people that play Mario 64, right? And that's, I think those people, maybe more so than you or me or maybe the average person, the people in those communities are a little more susceptible to the delusions of I'm paying for this service so I can get the world record.
Right.
That's my concern.
No, and that's a big thing in speedrunning is, I think you hear this a lot from the more mature, wizened speedrunners, which is to say, it doesn't have to be about getting the top time, and you're right. I think when you look at the communications, what were they advertising? Was it, is it the analog to Axe body spray commercials where, if you use Axe body spray, you're going to, get an attractive a conventionally attractive girlfriend. If you take lessons, will you get the top time in 70 star? That's another thing you have to scrutinize when it comes to saying, is this a good idea?
Yeah. If you chew 5 gum, Olivia Wilde will show up at your house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our fun tangent about learning the coaching, which was the tangent that we took after the crypto. So going back up to the root, I believe we're talking about overboost.
Yes.
And I'm interested. This is a very specific question. I'm interested in what the answer is, or what your perspective on it maybe specifically is. But how do you approach each guest? Is it sort of like a carte blanche approach? Is every person you prepare in a certain way? How do you mentally prepare for the show? And what sort of prep work do you do on your side that maybe other people don't really get to see?
Sure. I mention a little bit of this sometimes when I do the interviews, but my prep work, I try to focus on things that will give me a snapshot into the runner's temperament and history. When I get someone scheduled for an interview, I will ask them for some recommendations of VODs of theirs. So, and usually what I'm asking for is marathons, PBs, and I'll get all sorts of answers. If it's a guest who's been around for a while, has done a lot of GDQs, that might mean a lot of GDQ VODs. I also love it when guests give me other marathon VODs as well, because I've been really impressed with some of the other marathon VODs. I forget what it was. Someone did once send me a Speed Doxathon VOD. I forget who it was, but or Thunderthon or any of the other great marathon series that are out there. And I'll watch through them. A lot of times I'll have them on in the background while I'm doing my office work. And I just, some of them, if it's a longer run, especially, I'll just try to sort of marinate in it. I take some notes. It is so common for people during their PBs or in marathon commentary to already answer some of the questions that I'm going to ask. Because there's certain things I'm trying to chart out when I'm preparing. Did they get into streaming first or speedrunning? That's a big one, right? I'm trying to figure that out so I can order my script chronologically when I'm going through the questions. And other things that might be relevant as well, like what kind of runs do they do? If it's someone who does like retro consoles, there's a lot of questions I can ask about their setup, about how they convert, how they capture. If they've played a game for a long time, that game has changed a lot. If they've had a hand in routing, there might be stories about finding glitches. So the thing I'm kind of looking for is, like, I have like a long generic script, and what I'm looking to do is be able to fit things about this person into different parts of the script. Like, I always start off the interview with talking about something that is sort of hot and relevant for the person, and that could be an upcoming marathon run, something that person's working on right now, some run or something like that. So I try to give them like a little advertising up front, and then dive into their history, and then at the end do sort of cleanup on individual games, that they've run and that I watched VODs of. So, in terms of preparation, I guess to summarize that is that I'm typically watching VODs of the runner. I try to get a sort of selective one, especially like their first runs or, runs they're particularly proud of. GDQ is always, a highlight for anyone, ESA highlight. And I just take it from there. I try to do that video preparation, especially so I can get an idea of the speed of the interviewee. I'm sure this has been your experience as well. There are some guests, probably like me, who you could just set them going and they would talk forever and you don't even have to ask another question. But then there are some guests who, you need to kind of help along. You need to be, not that their answers are bad, but they might jump. Sometimes I have a guest where I'm like, how'd you get into gaming? And they'll be like, one sentence about how I got into gaming, and then they immediately jump to, and then I got into speedrunning. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do like trying to slow it down here, which is, again, not their fault. They're trying to tell me what they think is relevant, which is perfectly reasonable thing to do. So it's funny to see all the different speeds. I think that's been the biggest experiential thing to me, is that it's not so much prepping for a game that I'm not familiar with, because I have the guest with me. The guest can tell me everything they know about the game. They're the expert. It's sort of adjusting for the speed of the interview guest.
Yeah, no, for sure. I try to get an idea of like what they sound like on their stream. I try to go in their stream when they don't know that I'm there, and when they're in the middle of something, and I just listen, and how they talk to their chat, and how they talk to people they don't know in their chat, and how they do things. Can they walk and chew bubblegum, right? Which, can they play the game and talk and be fun and extemporaneous and tell a story, or do they freeze up? And then I don't make too many decisions based on that, but I use that information to be like, okay, this is how to get the answers out of people that you want to get. I think most people, they are like so afraid of just sounding foolish that they don't say anything at all. I think that they internalize that they sound foolish. I'm not saying that people sound foolish, but they're like, I don't want to sound like a donut, so I'm just going to get out the bare minimum. So sometimes you have to extract things from people, like you have to, like you're doing oral surgery. That was a double entendre. And sometimes you have to like, like you said, I'm just here for the ride. I ask you a question and you go off on your own, and it's good stuff. So it's really just about knowing what your guest is going to be like, and how you prepare. How do you prepare for the county's oldest man versus, the city council, right?
Right.
So I have not consciously tried, but maybe subconsciously tried to have a diverse guest list different than yours.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we don't do the same show. I don't think we do the same show, right? I think our shows are very different.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to just have every guest you had on. Because then it's like, or like, if I had a guest on, I'll put it this way to assuage my anxiety over the topic. If I had a guest on and the next week you had that person on and it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I'd be like, yeah, you're biting off my shit. But, the other way, I'm just like, man, is that what he thinks? He thinks I'm biting off his shit? I need to come up with different guests. But what's funny is people, and I think this is true, people have listened to them on your podcast and then they recommend, hey, you should get what did they tell me the other day? Someone told me you should get someone that was on the Overboost podcast on. I'm looking at
I'm pretty
list.
sure I went, so the peek behind the curtain, I'm pretty sure when I jumped in the server and like looked at the, I think you had just prompted people to recommend folks, and someone was like, how about Gala? And I was like, oh, I just had Gala on.
yeah, that's what I said. I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna wait a little bit. They were like, Argic. I'm like, okay, Argic, sure. Let's see. That was a while ago.
That was a while ago for me, yeah.
I looked at the last 5 episodes. I'm like, I'm not inviting any of these people. Honestly, and it's a little bit of a courtesy too.
Oh yeah.
It's like, it doesn't help anyone if I just interview, or you interview all the people on my show and I interview all the people on your show. But also, we wouldn't do that because why would we? But I think it's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the other thing too is that it can be even let's say there is overlap, in some capacity. I think too, checking back in with someone, especially with a different interviewee, as you said, giving some sort of a time to breathe. Like I know there was definitely a period of time where I think right around when I got into doing it more regularly. Another person who has been sticking with the speedrun interview stuff is Lat Mackey and Sequence Break, and there was definitely, I looked at his list and there was like some people on there that I really wanted to get, and I was like, damn, all right, I'm gonna have to wait. But now at this point, it's about at that point where, and the thing is, the folks that I would have wanted to talk to, it's not like they became static. They all kept doing stuff. In fact, some of them have done very interesting things since they were on Sequence Break, and that's going to be, a perfect opportunity for me to talk to them about, the new stuff that they're working on, in addition to, some of the history that I think that might Lat might have covered, but again, I can cover too, and also in the context, right? I mean, time changes everything.
Time does change everything, and like, to your credit, you could ask them a whole host of questions that the other show didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then that invariably changes the content of the episode. So there's definitely multiple ways to interview a person. I also, going back to like the podcast that has 3 episodes and one of them is cheese, like the problem with those shows is that they didn't have anything else going for them, right? They didn't have a plan, not to shit on them too hard, but they didn't have a plan. Like, once they got through the novelty of, oh, our first episode is cheese, like, they didn't have anything to fall back on, right? Like, it was just that one episode, They didn't have an idea of what to do after. It's like the dog that chases cars and he doesn't know what he's going to do when he catches one. It's like, okay, now what? Now we have a podcast. Now we have people listening. Now what? And now what do we do? How do you actually interview people that aren't just going to, spill it to you? Because, and maybe, how many of those would you say? You've done about 60 episodes of your podcast.
Yeah.
How many people really just come on and bear it all for you with like minimal prompting? Is it like, I would say for me, it's probably like 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 episodes.
Yeah, say that. I mean, I think the people who do that are the people who are themselves outstanding, entertainers and orators. I mean, if I were to highlight people, everyone that I would mention is someone who's just incredibly good at communicating. Your Eternal Enigma, Bobby the Blacktastic. These are all people who are just outstanding MCs. Then they can do that. It's a part of what they do.
Yeah. So once you run your course on, because you're not going to get one of those every episode.
No.
So once you burn through the first one, and maybe you get lucky and you get a second one, then you got nothing. You get nothing. You have nothing left. They have no method. That's what the word I'm looking for. They don't have a method to recreate it. It's like the person, like the savant that makes one painting. It's like, okay, do it again. Unfortunately, our society only values talent if you're able to replicate it. Right? So.
Yeah, I think that's bringing up maybe value is also a good thing to do here, because I think my concern, and I don't know what prompted these folks to do the podcast, but my concern is sometimes they feel like they have access to someone who has a following and that they can leverage that, and then they do it and it doesn't materialize in the way that they want it to, and and I could see that being a rude awakening that causes them to sort of break off from doing further episodes. And I think the if I had to make a constructive lesson to take away, it's to understand the value that you're trying to provide. Let's say they're trying to provide the history of, or sort of the how you got into speedrunning of a well-known speedrunner or something like that. And who is that, and also who is that for? Who is the audience for that value? Because I think with speedrunning, a lot of popularity can be dictated by things like game choice. Game choice tends to be king, I think, both in a lot of ways, in terms of success on Twitch and things like that. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing people for liking well-liked games. But, it's a reality to consider that if you're feeling, discouraged about something, if your goal is to make something for a larger audience, that's going to require research on your end to figure out where those audiences are. If your goal is to do the work of history and create these records for people to go to and say, how do all these people get into speedrunning? And as a host, I get to do the fun thing of watching all those VODs and meeting different people that I'm probably going to run into at events. So there's a lot of value for me and hopefully value I'm creating for other people. And I wonder for these hosts that do these short-lived shows, I would be curious to know. It feels weird to try and stalk someone about a project that didn't work out the way they wanted it to. But I wouldn't want to come at it not from I would try to come at it from the positive angle, which is to say, what was your expectation and why do you think it didn't live up to that expectation? That's the thing that I would want to know.
You know what they also have? This is a disadvantage for a lot of people today starting projects. I'm going to be really honest here that I tried a bunch of projects that didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
Like a ton. Probably 4 or 5 YouTube channels, a dozen podcasts that just never caught on. Nobody ever heard of them. No one listened to them. With no following and no interest. And I was able to fail, but I was able to fail in a private way. If that makes sense. I failed and nobody knew that I failed. It's so much harder because now people get a little success, right? They get a little bit of success and then they fail publicly. And that's so much worse than what anything else that, like I would have to go through. I've had 4 failed businesses. SpeedDocs is my 5th business. So I'm being a little critical, which I think it's fair, especially when something is public. But I'm also conscientious of the fact that, like, when those podcasts flamed out, it confirmed something to me. But it was also like failure is a good learning experience. How many projects? Yeah. Is there a project that stands out to you that didn't quite work or didn't get off the ground that you were pretty sure was going to work?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I feel like for me, yeah, I'm trying to look at the weird thing about Twitch streaming, which is a lot of what I've done, is that with Twitch streaming, I think everything's kind of amorphous, right? Everything's kind of in this stew of the stream and what you do through that. I mean, I guess I don't know if I would call it a sort of failure, but like a thing that never really took off for me. One of my Mechanations co-hosts, we had done some JRPG Let's Plays back in like the early 2010s. We played a few JRPGs together. We did like Wild Arms, Final Fantasy VII, Xenogears. And we love the memories of these things, and we learned a bit ourselves about how to use video editors at the time. Never really got any sort of following or anything. I don't know what our expectations were though. Like obviously, as I said, we look fondly on it as we played through Xenogears together, which is something that that we get to share. But that would probably be, I mean, that's certainly something where it never had any sort of following or but we learned a lot doing it technically and from I think a little bit of a perspective of performing, and and that's something that's benefited us. Certainly it's benefited me, and I think it's benefited him as well.
To what degree do you think the persona that you portray online is a performance about yourself? Like, how much of what you show to everyone else, like on this podcast, on your Twitch stream, on your podcast, is the 100% genuine article, and what percentage of it is performative?
I think it's funny for me because I feel like I am the persona that I give on Twitch, I would say, is fairly similar to the persona that I would present in company, period. Like if I'm telling a story, if I go over a friend's house and I'm gonna tell them about this dumb thing that happened to me while I was out on my bicycle, that tenor that I use will be similar to what I'm doing now, in terms of this interview or in terms of a Twitch stream. So I definitely feel like it is real in that it is not something just for Twitch or something just for podcasting. It is my lifelong, performing, presenting, entertaining persona. To what extent is that the real thing? I think it is. I would say it is pretty real because I've always considered myself to be a person who goes through, a sort of, moods where you want to be alone and moods where you want to perform. And, is the performing phase of the moon, is that fake or real? I'd say that's pretty real. I think, it's something I seek out to do. I turn on the Twitch stream. I do the podcast. So I think it's, I would say it's a pretty real part of me. And it's the same kind of thing. I mean, it happens often enough that I'm doing something and I'm like, I do a bit, I do a routine. And my wife is in the chat and she says, yeah, he does that here in the house too. He's always on his bullshit. All right.
Man, we had to call you down here. Your son told the teacher that he was back on his bullshit again.
Mm-hmm,
well, is he?
Yeah, that might actually be a true story as well. I was always the teacher's pet who weaseled out of every punishment, which is a hilarious legacy to have and something I don't feel bad about at all.
It's so funny to hear you say that you weaseled out of everything, but you completely own it.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I mean, that's one. It's a thing that's really funny. As we get older, there's this sense that you will feel embarrassed. Like say your parents have embarrassing stories about something that happened to you when you were a kid, and they tell these stories to embarrass you. And and there was a period of time I think where those stories were embarrassing for me, and I think I've now come around so far to really truly always being on my bullshit that I kind of own those stories, and for one reason or another, I always kind of love them. Which I hope everyone can have that level of confidence. It's very fun.
That's a level of confidence I do not possess. I'm very envious of you. I think personally, I just look at every situation for what it could have been, even if it's like so. Like I look at every podcast for what it could have been, not for what it is. I look at every video that I've ever edited for what it could have been, or everything I've ever written. Like, oh, it could have been so much better if I had done this or this. It's also kind of smudged by the benefit of hindsight, like
Sure.
hindsight's 2020. But I always think about like past events too. Like, man, if I had said this instead of it being really awkward, it would have been really funny. Like, it would have just changed the whole like theory of the moment. So I don't have. I wish I had that where I was like, oh yeah, I was a shitter and I'm proud about it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely have a bit of an extreme first draft, last draft, get it out the door sort of feeling, where I just put it out there sometimes, and I learned from that, and to me, there's always the next thing. Yeah, I guess it's sort of. I feel like one of the things that can sometimes hurt me when I'm trying to figure things out is that I feel like I am very bad at intuiting how things work. This is one of the reasons that video games appeal to me, is because a video game is a perfect little laboratory where you can press buttons, restart, press buttons again, and you can really truly experiment to your heart's content in a video game, and in a way that's kind of harder to do. You really don't want to you take a scientific lab experiment approach to your personal relationships, your day job. Those are things that you can't take that same risk with. And so, having the truly earned knowledge or intuitive knowledge, as I said, intuition is very bad for me. But the other side of that coin is that once I do commit something, it is truly in my repertoire. And then also I look back at the things that I've done and I say, well, what would I have done differently? Like this is where I was. This is who I was at the time. And I made decisions.
Listen, I'll talk about stories that cause me like pain, right? But those don't embarrass me. The ones that embarrass me are the ones where like I missed something and I made a mistake. But like my friends and family will be quick to point out that there's a whole genre of stories that are just called CJ stories because of how unbelievable and painful they are for me usually.
Oh.
So it's funny because I'm like, okay, not enough time has happened for it to be funny yet, right? So I'll wait a few days to tell people, and then I tell people, and it's like, okay, it's funny now. Like, this is a good example. I've been dragooned into doing IT at my job. Like, they forced me.
Sure.
Because I let them know that I like to fix computers on the side, which is my terminal mistake. Any hoosers. So I get a call. It's like, speakers are not working. I'm like, this is not an emergency. So I get another call. My speakers aren't working. I'm like, this is not an emergency. I'm busy. And so finally he called me. He's like, my speakers aren't working. It's ever since you gave me my new monitor. I'm like, these two things have nothing in common, but I'll come over. So I go over. I said, is it plugged in? This guy calls me about once a month because the printer's not working because there's no paper in it, right? Like, does it have paper in it? Yes. I get over there. There's no paper. So I go over. I'm like, is it plugged in? He says, yes. So I do all my tests, and it's one of these things. It's like a 2-speaker and a subwoofer setup. I don't know why he needs this, but I get down on the floor. It's not plugged into the wall.
Yep.
I'm like, you have to plug it into the wall. He says, why? It's got power. I said, The strip has power, not the fucking. You have to plug it in. So I plug it in. Sure enough, it comes right on. He goes, "Oh, what'd you do?" I said, "I plugged it in. It was unplugged. You donut." So that one took a few days for it to be funny, but you know what? Here we are.
I mean, they see, some folks. Speaking of learning from past stories, some folks don't learn from past stories.
No. He has at least 20 tickets in the books that I've resolved that are paper didn't have printer. Printer didn't have paper, I should say. If you could have any guest that you haven't had on your show yet, that you haven't asked to be on your show, but you could ask anybody, past, present, or future, to be on your show, who would you have on?
Who would I want on?
Like Dream Book the Overboost podcast. You can name more than one name.
I mean, I think there's like definitely people who I am very interested in, but are sort of like maybe only like tangentially related to speedrunning. But I would like want to know how it is that they had a moment of speedrunning in their life. The two that come to mind, one is a streamer that I watch on a semi-regular basis that I probably could reach out. I don't know if he would care. It was McCall45, a streamer that I watch all the time, has an incredible encyclopedic knowledge of all sorts of obscure games, especially Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese games, even games from other Greece, Argentina, like just a truly global interest and passion for games, and sort of how he came to be by that is definitely one I would ask. The other one that I would ask is, do you know who Dan Olson is? He's a YouTuber. He does the Folding Ideas series.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think his his recent big video from maybe it was like late last year. He did a video about what happened to all the flat Earth YouTubers. Like he's like keeping an eye on like conspiracy theory folks, and of course it turns out that all the flat Earth YouTubers became QAnon YouTubers, which zero surprise there, right? It's kind of a funny video. A good video though too. I mean, I would say one of those YouTubers whose filmmaking scripting approaches the level of documentary. But Dan Olson, I forget which one it was, did have a run at a GDQ some years ago. And I would love to understand how that happened. One time he put out like a tweet prompt that was like, "Hey, do you want me to be on your podcast?" And I like replied to it, be like, "Hey, I interview people how they got into speedrun. I know you haven't done it in a few years, but like, would you want to?" And but obviously this guy has enough of a following that there are 100 people who had already replied before me. I've never tried to reach out directly. And again, he does stream on Twitch once in a while, and like usually streams a 6th generation license game. Like here is, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on PS2 or something like that. So clearly in my lane in terms of game selection. But who knows how much he even remembers the speedrunning experience. But that would probably be one of those two. I think would be of people that I know. If there are other celebrity speedrunners out there, I'd love to know about it. I would be very, very curious.
I think about like, how does the show end? Like, I don't plan on ending it anytime soon, right? But I think about sometimes like, is this an open-ended experience that I'm going to have? At some point the podcast has to end because I have to go on and do other things in my life. Not to be too existential about it, but like, so how does it end? Where is the end? Is it after I interview X amount of people? And so arbitrarily I've set a goal. If Clint Stevens ever does the podcast, I will end the show. So it will end at some point, Like, I don't know if you've ever thought about that with your show, but I'm like, it has to have some finality, because that means that everything that came before it is like a contained thing,
Mm-hmm.
And that it has some extra meaning, and that what it is what it'll always be, right? So I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot more recently. Not that I plan on ending it, but just like in thinking about like, how do you prevent something from just becoming a tired, recycled version of itself?
Yeah, it's something that's been on my mind. I think right now I'm sort of probably in the process of dropping the sort of frequency of episodes, and part of that too is I think I forget if it was in the podcast proper or beforehand, but we had talked about a little bit about turning the corner in the pandemic. Initially, I was doing Overboost episodes every other week, and part of life in the once it became clear beyond the initial month or two that the pandemic was going nowhere. At that point, I upped the frequency to once every week, where it's pretty much been for almost about a year now, and I'm sort of at the point where I am pretty much now over SGQ, letting my foot off the gas pedal a little bit. And so I think what's going to happen is I'm going to be more choosy and selective, in terms of who I want to get on. I'm going to really zero in. I'm going to, I do a little bit of work where I look through someone's Twitter feed. Have they been on podcasts before? I do that kind of stuff. Because again, I want to provide that value to the guest, to myself, and to, a potential prospective audience that is interested in that history. How else to define the endpoint? I mean, the other endpoint is because I put it primarily in the terms of hobbyist work for which I have a passion. The answer is that passion needs to remain. I need to budget my time. Right now, having more flexibility for me to pursue speedrunning myself or to do other projects. This week, as of the time we're recording, I'm going to be doing for the first time ever an interview with a game developer for a game that I've done speedruns of. And so, if I'm dropping Overboost to half the frequency it used to be, but that means more speedruns and more, other types of content like that, that's the appropriate move for me. I gotta make that decision. And so, the answer pretty much becomes, is there the opportunity to do good interviews and then, adjust the frequency accordingly? And sometimes that could mean stopping. When I look at long running interview podcasts, My Insane Pace was one that I'd brought up before. If you look at, the past year or two of that feed, you'll see that he shifted his interest to other areas. He did more commentary. He did stuff like that. And that meant fewer episodes of the podcast. But clearly that was the right move for him. And I think that kind of experience would probably apply to a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about like changing if the podcast in what it serves, what purpose it serves for you, if that changes, it's necessary and important that you change your approach to it, right? So if it's like, hey, I'm not getting the same fulfillment from it, or it's not servicing me in a way that maybe doing something else could, right? Like, oh, streaming is really the move for me right now. So, okay, well, I think that as long as, your expectations and your understanding of yourself are clear, that's the best thing that you can possibly do for yourself, right? To take care of yourself. I don't know. I was thinking about the other thing that I think about is how little I've done to promote it. Like you talked about like going on the front page of SRC as soon as they opened up. And I have done little to no promotion of the show because I didn't want to be the show that only did 2 episodes.
Sure.
And I wanted the work to come first. I didn't want to be like, oh, I started a diet and posted the pictures of me in my exercise clothes to Instagram and then sat on the couch and ate Doritos because I got the endorphins I wanted from people telling me they were happy that I was working out, right? Like a real thing that happens and why a lot of diets go off is because the people telling you that you're doing great is the same as doing the work. It gives you that same endorphin rush. So I wanted the endorphins, I wanted the satisfaction to come from doing the work and not from people excited to see the show. Does that make sense? So
Sure.
I've never even posted about it on like the Speedrun subreddit. I tweet about it, but whoever I can retweet on my main account. So I don't know.
I think with that sort of approach, and it's certainly reasonable to want to believe that, to some extent, even the work can speak for itself. Yeah, I think that the feeling I try to have about it is that, I think we just talked about in the context of ending or leaving a show, the idea of being excited or engaged to do it. And I think, when it comes to, and maybe, you have an angle here with the thoughts about marketing and advertising, but certainly for me, it's way more natural to do that kind of, posting to Twitter or posting to our Speedrun or something like that, when I feel like there is something for me to communicate that I'm excited about, to really sort of like be ready to give the sales pitch. Because the other thing too is a little bit, if you sell it and you enjoy selling it, then you want to deliver the goods, and so sometimes you got to say, well, this is my goal and I'm going to do it. Like, that's almost, to me, that's a big part of speedrun streaming, is saying, hey, I'm going to get this PB. I got these splits up here. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to put in the work, and you can watch this stream. You can watch me put in the work, and eventually I'll get there.
Yeah. No, to your point about, like, do I have a thing about this, like, marketing and advertising perspective? I agree with you. It's something that the show would benefit from. Like, and I should, I work at a car dealer. I should be selling my product, right? I should be working my pay plan. But it was more important to me to get the catalog first. I wanted there to be something to promote. Nothing bothers me more than seeing the ads for a show with like a $10 million marketing budget, and then I tune in and I get one episode. You know what I mean? I'm like, when I promote it, I want people to know that they're getting a show that they can go back and listen to. I think it was Edenal who runs ESA, and he said that he had to go, like, he had to drive across Sweden for God only knows what reason. Shout out to Edenal if you're listening. Friend of the show. And he listened to all the episodes of the podcast in one go. And what's funny was someone had tweeted at him that they recommended the show, and all he wrote at the time was this podcast ... which sent me into an anxiety frenzy for months, because I'm like, this show good? This show bad? Like, this show, tell me. Until finally he asked to be on the show because he loved the show. So I don't know. It's sort of like I talk directly to people all the time about it. The Discord is one very visible place, but then there's also the people that DM me on Twitter. There's people that like they listen to the show every week. Downloading is way more popular, but they don't want to do anything with the YouTube or the Discord. So it's weird to have like the audience segmented in that way too. I don't even know how to reach everybody in one fell swoop. So one part is, I think I wanted to have it, I wanted to build it, and then they would come, right? Have my Field of Dreams moment. You're not invited, Ray. And then on the flip side of it, it's like, maybe didn't feel like I wanted to promote something that wasn't and it's so weird thinking about it in the context of a podcast, but I didn't want to promote something that really wasn't like ready for general consumption. Gave me time to figure things out and how the show was going to go and whatever.
Yeah, it can certainly be weird. I think when you're putting out something that's intended to be a sort of regular delivery of material, that, especially knowing that you're going to learn lessons from those initial episodes, whether those are production or script or how to communicate with a guest. But like, I also, I would say that is, I guess that's a feature of the medium, is, and I think this is true for other podcasts, any podcast really, any sort of podcast, is that necessarily the structure will change because things will work and things will don't work. Sometimes the things that don't work consume the show, and the show ends and it stops, and that's, that was its fate. But sometimes, you end up getting the successful show that has a lengthy run. Like I certainly feel now with Overboost that I have a script that I am very comfortable with Mechanations. I have a process with my co-hosts, where we're sharing notes beforehand so we know what points that we want to make sure each one of us can get to during a recording. And you fall into that comfortable rhythm, and you get to look forward to communicating with other people. So it's definitely AI. I definitely understand the uncertainty about that initial product, especially because I think it's almost guaranteed. I will be amazed if someone can point to any podcast, even the most miraculously scripted, produced podcast, and say, "Yeah, that episode 1 is the same as episode 25." It's not going to be true.
It's so hard to point to a show that has the same quality on episode 1 as it does on episode 25.
Mm-hmm.
Like any medium,
Yeah.
Someone's first work is always exploratory in that way. It's why pilots are so jarring, right?
Oh yeah.
I love Scrubs. Scrubs is one of my favorite shows. The pilot for Scrubs is bizarre. It hits some of the beats, but it misses. So it's like it's off tempo, is what it kind of feels like. And then it's but they grew into it, It's one of those things. They just grow into your skin. It's all part of growing up.
True.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add before we start wrapping up?
No, I don't think so. I think I feel like we've covered a sort of some good shop talk in terms of starting, maintaining, ending, expectations, prep for guests. I think we've covered a full lifetime there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank my guests for being on the show today. If you want to check them out, you can go to speedrun.com. That's speedrun.com/user/PMC. That's Paul Michael CJ Trilogy. There's a Just Cause 4 run that I was actually lurking for, I believe, on Twitch. Yep, like I said, I like to listen to people before they come on the show. You can follow him on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/PMCTrilogy. Again, Paul Michael CJ. You can follow him on Twitter. PMCTrilogy, @PMCTrilogy. Trilogy spelled TRILOGY. Remember that spelling. That is going to help you for every other link. And on YouTube, go to YouTube and type in PMC Paul Michael CJ Trilogy, TRILOGY. You can check out all the episodes of the Overboost podcast, as well as your PBs, which are uploaded there. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Glad that we got to get you on and talk shop. It was a great time. And thank you to everybody who listens each and every week, that downloads the show, comments, likes, does whatever you do to support the show. We really appreciate it. Remember, Speed Docs-a-thon is taking place August 27th, 28th, 29th, September 3rd, September 4th, September 5th, and September 6th. It is 7 days across 2 weekends, the second weekend being ending on Labor Day. And we're raising money for All Hands and Hearts. I don't ask you to donate money. You don't have to give. Just come and watch the show. It'll be a lot of fun. You can check out the schedule. It will be linked on the SRC page. So that'll be speedrun.com/SDAT2021. That's speedrun.com/SDAT2021. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.